And welcome to part one of something that I've been working on for not a very long time, but for a while. It's the reason I haven't been posting as much. It's the reason why I've like stopped posting for a while. I sort of had to get this under wraps, like sort of do everything and like get everything ready and like then learn how to actually edit, because this one's gonna have a bit of actual editing instead of like putting two videos together and just calling it a day, you know. So first, this is going to be part one. In part one, we're going to go over the deck, the board, the phases of the turn, and priority. Then, in part two, we're going to go over more. For now, I'm just going to go over what a deck looks like, what a side deck looks like, what a extra deck is, what the ban list is, the main field that you play on in Yu-Gi-Oh!, as well as how a turn looks like. So first, let's get started with how the deck looks like. First, in a normal Yu-Gi-Oh deck, you can have from 40 to 60 cards. Here, I have 41 cards because most people use 40 cards because that's the most consistent you can get a deck. It's the least amount of cards in that you're allowed to play, which means you're going to see the cards that you want to see more often. Certain strategies play 60 cards for different reasons, and that's that. But mainly, most of the time, you're going to want to stick to around 40 cards. I like 42, just because that's just what I like. Then, next big part of the deck is going to be the extra deck. So, the extra deck is here. These set of monsters. In my deck, it's just Link and Fusion monsters. So, for right now, all you need to know is that there are 15 extra deck monsters in your extra deck. And you can go from 0 to 15, so you don't have to have an extra deck. There are some strategies that have ways of playing that you don't use an extra deck, so you don't really need one all the time, but a lot of the time this is going to be like your main toolbox. This is going to be how you win games. This is going to be like how you have your big powerful monsters, because they are a little bit harder to get out than the main deck monsters. But for this, like I said, you can have 0 to 15 cards. Then the side deck. Now in Master Duel, I can't really show the side deck, but the side deck in Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you're going to plan on playing in person and in paper, is sort of like a second deck that you can switch cards in and out of in games 2 and 3. So how Yu-Gi-Oh! Usually works is, besides on Master Duel, because Master Duel is dumb, and I have mixed feelings about Master Duel, but the biggest thing that is different from Master Duel than real Yu-Gi-Oh!, as I would say, is that instead of being a best of 1, the games are best 2 out of 3. So in game 1, you just play with your main deck. Your like is what you call your main deck. So these cards right here is going to be what I would play in game 1. So in game 1, you just come in with this. This is your main strategy. This is how you do, like, just out of the gate, and that's how it is. But in games 2 and 3, you're allowed to switch cards in and out of your main deck and your side deck. So you always have to have the same number of cards in your side deck as you started off with. So usually it's going to be 15 cards in your side deck. And when you side out and side in, you have to still have 15 cards in your side deck, but those cards can be changed from your main deck into your side deck. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you switch one card from your side deck, you have to take one card out of your main deck and put it into your side deck. So it's just basically switching cards in and out. So cards that don't work against a certain opponent, you take out. Cards that do better against a certain opponent, you take in. Then another big rule of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you can have a maximum amount of 3 cards of the same name in your main deck and your side deck and extra deck. So what do I mean by that? I mean, you see here how I have 3 copies of this card, Elemental Hero Stratos. That means in my deck, I can have from 0 to 3 copies of this card with the same art, same name, same effect, same whatever. I can have 3 copies of it in there to make it more consistent. I can't have more, and I can't have more than 3. So you can't just make a deck full of like just 3 really powerful cards that win you the game, because that would be boring, right? That's not how the game works. But you can have up to 3 copies of the same card. Now, this doesn't apply for all cards. So, as you can see here, this copy of Harpy's Feather Duster has a 1 on it. That means that it's limited. So, what does that mean? That means that in Yu-Gi-Oh! And in Yu-Gi-Oh!, normal Yu-Gi-Oh! And Master Duel have a different ban list, but what I'm getting to is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a ban list. Now, what does this mean? That means that there are certain copies of cards that you can only play out 1. So, 1 copy of a card in your deck and side deck. Only have at 2 which is something like this, which you can only have 2 copies of it in your main deck or a side deck, and something at 3, or banned. Banned means that you can't have any copies of it in your main deck or side deck. Or extra deck even. Extra deck is in there too. It's just you don't really ever think of the extra deck when you think limited. And at least I don't, because I don't play meta cards. So I usually don't play meta. But you like I said, Master Duel and Yu-Gi-Oh have a different, or normal Yu-Gi-Oh have a different ban list that you're going to need to follow when it comes to making a deck. Now let's go on to the board. Okay, so to show off the board, I sort of just did a duel against an AI here, just because it's going to be easier for me. Look at my little buddy, Marshmallow. Anyway, I thought it'd be easier to use Master Duel to explain the board, because it's easier to visualize and it's easier to explain. Just me going into something, me doing something, and showing you guys. So, first off, let's talk about the main monster zones. So these things right here are what we call the main monster zones. Now, what does that mean? This is where you can normal summon monsters, tribute summon monsters, and summon cards that are called XYZ, Fusion, Synchro, and Pendulum to these zones. So as you can see, we have 5 zones, and a monster, so like if I try to summon Stratos here, I can put him in any one of these 5 zones. Any one of these zones he can go into, and that's basically what you usually want to do. Yeah, so let's just summon Stratos here. He has an effect. I'm just going to activate it, add some random card, because that's just what I'm going to do. Let's just add Ferris, whatever. Then we have the spell and trap card zones. These are these 5 zones on the bottom right here. This is where spells and traps go when you activate them or when you set them. Now, one thing about monsters and spell and trap cards is you can only have up to 5 monsters in the main monster zones and up to 5 spell and traps in the spell and trap card zones at the same time. Now, you can get monsters off of your field in different ways, and again, that's going to come as we keep on explaining what happens in the game. But for now, all you need to know is that there are 5 monster zones, 5 spell and trap card zones. Then we have the pendulum zones. Now, this is a special spell and trap card zone where you put pendulum monsters. Now, right now, I don't have a way to show what a pendulum monster is. I'll get to that in another video. But for now, we can just imagine that these 2 spells and traps are pendulum monsters. So the pendulum monster zones are the 2 spell and trap card zones on the edges. So where I put these 2 spells and traps, that's where the pendulum monster zones are. Then we have the graveyard. So after a card is used, it goes to the graveyard. The graveyard is this thing over here. It basically, if we ever activate or after activate a card or get rid of a monster, if a monster dies by battle or we get rid of it, it goes to the graveyard. Now, how can I show this? Here, this guy just activated his effect and it's going to destroy my spell trap. So what is going to happen after it goes? It goes to the graveyard. Now, inversely, my monster, when it is destroyed by, not inversely, but second, when my monster, when it is destroyed by battle and leaves the field, it goes to the graveyard. And third, when a trap or spell is activated, so like I'm going to do here, a spell and trap card is going to be activated, my infinite impermanence is going to go there, it's going to go to the graveyard. So that's how the graveyard works. After you use a card, after a card dies by battle, it just goes to the graveyard, and that's basically where your used cards go. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than this, as some cards have effects in the graveyard, but for now, all you need to know for the basics is that your graveyard is where cards go after they're used. Then we have the field spell zone. I'm going to go into what field spells are later. For now, this is where field spell... there's a certain type of spell card that's called a field spell, and it goes here, and then it's separate from your normal spell card zones. It's not a monster zone, and it is what it is. Now, I'm going to go into the extra monster zone. Now, the extra monster zone is this thing right here. Only certain types of monsters can go into the extra monster zone. So monsters that so here I'm going to summon this guy, and because Stratos is a normal monster, he just goes into the main monster zones. But I'm not going to activate his effect because it doesn't matter. But in the extra monster zones, cards that can go here are anything that comes from the extra deck. Now, that means Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monsters. Now, Link monsters are a special case because Link monsters can only go into the extra monster zone or a monster that or a zone that a Link monster points to. So here you can see that this Link monster, I could only summon him to the extra monster zone. I could have summoned to either one, but I could only summon him to either extra monster zone. And I'll explain the mechanics of Link monsters in another video. But for the last thing that I'm going to explain is priority. Now this is a little, not really a little, it's sort of a thing that you don't really think about when you play Yu-Gi-Oh, but it is really important. So I'm going to say it in this video because this is one of the shorter videos and I think I can stick it in here. So what it means is that when it is your turn, you get first priority to do any action. So if we go here into the battle phase, first, you can see this blue thing here. That indicates the priority. So that means I get first action on anything that happens. To activating spell, trap cards, activating monster effects, attacking. I get first priority in doing any of those actions. Then, if I have no response, if I have nothing to do, then your opponent can activate a card and do whatever. Same thing if we go into main phase 2. First, I have the chance to activate a card, and then my opponent has a chance to activate a card. Now, since that's sort of a simplification of it, it's not a lot more complex. There's just a lot more like steps to it in every turn. There's like different parts of the turn, or different parts of the phases. But I think that's too complex for beginners, and you only really need to know that if you're going into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! If you're just playing with your friends, you don't really need to know that. You can just say, like, I start my turn, and so whatever. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. That is going to be the first part of the video. In the next part of the video, we're going to really focus on the battle phase. The battle phase is a little bit tricky, and I think that it needs a lot of explaining. So I'm gonna just put the brunt of it in a little short, maybe a shorter video, but it's something that needs to be on its own, so I'm gonna focus on that. If you guys like the video and want to see the other ones, learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh for real, I'm gonna have it on a playlist, and I'm gonna upload it all at the same time, so you don't guys have to worry about waiting for anything or if you want to see. Yeah, that's it for now. I'll see you guys later. I hope you have a great day.